So back in 2010, the now defunct website Zelda Informer pieced together an older official Legend of Zelda documentary made by Nintendo of Japan that unofficially got translated at some point in time, that even today is an incredible resource on unique details on Zelda's influence on many classic Japanese game devs, and has some unique details on the first game. In that documentary, when talking about his inspiration for the way Link grows powerful over time in the first game, Shigeru Miyamoto says this.
生まれた時のいきさつはね、何やったかな。やっぱりね、パソコンゲームのブラックオニキスとかウルティマみたいな影響を受けてるんですよね。
Ultima is, of course, the granddaddy of all video game RPGs, but the first time I saw the stores, I thought, what the fuck is the Black Onyx? The other game that he mentioned, I have never heard about. The relatively short Wikipedia page explains that this is an RPG that was only originally released for home computers in Japan, which explains why I have never heard of it, but its main developer has a distinctly non-Japanese name, Hank Rogers. So what gives? And man, am I about to tell you a story. It's 1983 and a Dutchman that grew up in a combination of the Philippines, the Netherlands, and New York, that went to university in Hawaii and then moved to Japan to chase a girl, is now trying to start a business making video games, Hank Rogers. He realizes walking through the streets of Akihabara that the Japanese game scene has no RPGs, and a genre that he's a fan of as a prolific Dungeons & Dragons player from his university days, so he figures he could, for his very first game project in his life, break into a new genre in a country where he did not even speak the language. I know all of these details because he wrote a book that in the first third or so has a pretty detailed chronology of what happened. And also, I spoke with him. So I want to talk a little bit about what I think is secretly one of the most influential things that you have done, which is the Black Onyx. So you decide to move away from the family business to get into video games in a genre that no one in Japan had ever done before. Where did that courage to attack a problem of that magnitude?
Okay. So you talk about it like it was courage and magnitude and all that, but I had no idea what I was doing. So I did not know how big of a deal, because all I'd ever done up till then was homework assignments. That's it. I never attempted to make a product or something like that. So this is my first chance to do anything like that, and I had no idea how much memory actually it's only 55K was in terms of building code. And I found that out during development. It's like, oh, I'm already out of memory, and it happened really fast. And then, there were bits of the code that I said, you know what, and now I have to choose, because I can only keep the most important parts of the game, because there's no room for anything else. And so when I was started, I was thinking to make this game, and then I ended up making this game. Okay, so what's left was the pure role-playing, going up levels and gaining experience and getting money and fighting monsters and going deeper and deeper and deeper into the dungeon. All of that was preserved. All the different character classes and all of the other extra fluff, I just couldn't fit into the first game.
To figure out how to sell a game, Hank walked into a store called Koei with a friend that spoke Japanese and just started asking questions, and discovered that the store also published games. Mind you, the game industry was nothing like what we're used to today, and the concept of a random computer game store publishing games was not unusual. Hi, Alex from the future here. Turns out Koei grows up to be like a real company and merges with Tecmo to create Koei Tecmo. That Koei Tecmo. And the Arikawas are still chairman of this company. Huh. The president of the store/company, Yoichi Arikawa, agreed to supply him with a computer and to publish games after a short pitch. Koei could subtract all their costs like advertising and PR, and then they will split the profits with Hank, which was important because Hank could use that to learn how much Koei was spending on PR and advertising for the game. After all, he wanted to build his own company eventually. A few months later, when Hank shows up with a prototype and an expectation to sign an actual contract, Yoichi is gone and replaced by his wife, Keiko Arikawa, who explains that the entire agreement is completely invalid and they will just give him a percentage of the retail price. Hank stands his ground and Keiko responds with, "Then there is no deal, and I will make sure you never publish your game." Cool. Next step, a meeting with SoftBank. Saying that out loud in 2025 sounds crazy, considering that SoftBank is one of the biggest tech investors in the world right now, but back then SoftBank was a much smaller company, distributing magazines and software for PC games. A 30-minute meeting turns out into a 3-hour meeting as the prototype captures the interest of their representatives, and they encourage Hank to form a company to publish the game himself, promising to buy 3,000 copies if the game is done by the holiday season. Now, at this point, the story seems pretty straightforward, right? It even sounds familiar to the Sierra origin story from a past video. Hank forms his company, Bulletproof Software, with the assistance of Akemi, his wife, and the very same person he had taken the decision to go to Japan for, and they set up an office in Akemi's family house. Hank dedicates himself fully to finishing the game and expanding his team, including several people from Koei, the same company that had threatened him, and prepares a full-page magazine ad to promote the game in all gaming magazines. And here's where the problems start. All magazines refused to run it. Turns out Keiko Erikawa had called every single magazine and told them not to advertise Hank's game, probably trying to make good on that thread that she had made originally. And all the employees he had poached sure didn't help. Hank had to tell the magazines that he will take Keiko to court for restraint of trade, and all of them will be asked to testify. This was a bluff, by the way. Hank had no idea what he was doing. He was talking about how the Japanese legal system worked. But most magazines accepted and run the ad. And this is when Hank discovered that his ad sucked. No one in Japan had played an RPG. The ad was eye-catching, but no one had any idea what they were looking at. Some screenshots were added to some of the subsequent ads, but that did not help. And by then, the meager advertising budget was just gone. SoftBank found out and they cut their order from 3,000 to 600. No store was ordering the thing. It was a catastrophe.
I mean, I hadn't thought it through. I'd never published anything. And so, you know, all I wanted to do is make the game. So, and I made the game. And then once I'd made the game, I came to the realization that nobody in Japan plays Dungeons and Dragons. So they had no idea what a role-playing game was. Whereas in the US, we had Ultima, we had Wizardry, and so people moved from playing D&D on paper and with miniatures to a computer game very easily. They already knew how to play a role-playing game. In Japan, nobody knew anything. So that was good and it was bad. It just helped me focus on, you know, making a beginner's game, so to speak.
The game finally seemed to start getting some traction after you got to get the reviewers in different magazines to actually play it, right?
Yeah.
Was there a lesson learned there in the sense that some games you just have to have them in your hands for them to click?
That's definitely yes. But the other lesson is if you're sitting in a room thinking, oh shit, my game is not selling, what do I do now? You have to learn how to think outside the box. You know, so I asked, so how do Japanese people find out about computer games? Well, they read about them in the magazine. He says, well, how do you get into the magazine? Well, you have a hit, and then they come to your office and they interview you. Well, I said, this is obviously not happening here. You know, nobody's showing up at my door. Nobody knows what a role-playing game is. There's zero interest. So let's create some interest. So that's when I told my guys, look, make appointments at every magazine, and then I showed them how to play a role-playing game. And once you get started on a role-playing game, and you know, it's just magnetic. You want to go up levels. You want to find more treasure. You want to, you know, experience more dangerous places. So that's the whole point of RPG. And I think I captured that. And as a result, I captured all those people who were at the magazines, you know, working on or playing my game. And so by in February, we had rave reviews in every magazine, and in April we had ordered. Instead of having 600 for Christmas, we had like 10,000 for April and 10,000 for May, 10,000 for each month after that.
With the rave reviews out in the press by April, SoftBank upped their order to 10,000 copies, and it will go on to sell 10,000 copies per month for at least a year, making it the best-selling game in that year in Japan, which is almost certainly how Shigeru Miyamoto came in contact with it, and one of his inspirations for the first Legend of Zelda, which Hank did not know about.
When Shigeru Miyamoto talks about the original Legend of Zelda, and he talks about his inspirations for the game, and particularly the growth that Link goes through, he always mentions two games, Ultima and Black Onyx. And you have met Miyamoto several times. When you originally met him or started building a relationship with him, did he knew you were the Black Onyx guy? Was that an interplay factor in that process?
Oh, if I met him, it would have been years after Black Onyx was the #1 game in Japan in 1984. So you telling me this now? It's the first time I hear that Miyamoto played Black Onyx.
You're kidding me.
I didn't know that.
1 second. So this is from a documentary that Nintendo released 2005, I believe.
生まれた時のいきさつはね、何やったかな。やっぱりね、パソコンゲームのブラックオニキスとかウルティマみたいな影響を受けてるんですよね。
I had it on my research
I'm going to
materials
put that
for
on my
this.
website.
I honestly, I was a little bit surprised when I was reading the book, and that wasn't mentioned anywhere.
Because I didn't know.
Because if I had worked in a game that influenced the Legend of Zelda, like that would be framed in my apartment, like in the wall when people enter in.
Okay, there you go. I will.
So-
I'm definitely going to frame that on my website.
Given that Hank will end up having a professional relationship with Nintendo and Miyamoto, that caught me off guard. I guess Miyamoto is the sort of person to keep his cool when meeting other developers that he's a fan of. And at this point you might ask, a professional relationship with Nintendo? How did that happen? Well, funny you should ask.
Okay, so I started the relationship. My wife actually read an article in a magazine that said Mr. Yamauchi plays Go. Go is a Japanese board game, black and white stones. And I had, at that time, somebody had submitted to me a game on the Commodore 64. It's a Go game. 9x9, so it's not like your full 19x19 Go. So it's really a Go game for kids. And the Commodore 64 turns out to have the same CPU as the Nintendo, a 6502. And I said, that code, the algorithm will work just without touching it on the Nintendo machine. All I have to do is change the graphics, change the audio, and do all of the other stuff that we do in normal games. I wrote Mr. Yamauchi a fax. I sent him a fax. Mr. Yamauchi, my name is Hank Rogers. I can make a Go game for your Nintendo machine. I'm leaving for the States on Saturday. I would like to meet you before I go. I didn't mention that I lived in Japan. But I was leaving on Saturday, so it created a little bit of urgency. And on Wednesday, I get a fax back from Mr. Yamauchi's assistant. Mr. Yamauchi will see you tomorrow. Wow. So I got to see him like 2 days from sending him a fax. I got a meeting with Yamauchi. And of course, he had a reputation. 5 of us companies. It was my company, Bulletproof Software, Falcom, T&E Software, Square, and Enix. 5 companies, personal computer. We were like the top of the personal computer. We went to Nintendo and said, we would like to make Nintendo games. And Mr. Imonishi came out and said, no, you guys know nothing about how to make Nintendo games. And so they basically just said, sorry, we're not interested. I got in the room with Yamauchi. It was my first meeting in Japanese. I said, I can make a Go game for your machine. And he said, I can't give you any programmers. And I said, I have programmers. I don't need programmers. I just need money. And he said, how much money? And I thought, oh my God, this is going so fast. I had never even thought about this. I said, the biggest number I could think of, $300,000. And he reached across the table and he said, deal. I was like, just like that. I was like, oh, okay, now I've got to go and contact the guy in England and convince him to come to Japan to move his code over to the Nintendo machine. I got to do all this stuff. So that's, that's how I got to meet him the first time. The second time I got to meet him is 9 months later when the product was finished and I'm sitting across from him and I realized that he doesn't know how to use the controller. Like he has never played any of his games. I couldn't believe it. Finally, he gives the controller to his underling and he says, I want to go here, I want to go here, I want to go. So Mr. Yamauchi is a 6th-degree black belt, a 6th dan in Go. And he wins a game, hands down. And he says, the game, it's too weak for Nintendo. And I said, Mr. Yamauchi, it's an 8-bit computer. It's a miracle that it plays Go at all. We are never going to see a stronger Go program than this. And he said, he repeats himself, it's not strong enough for Nintendo after playing one game. It's like he's saying to me, like, which part of it's not strong enough for Nintendo did you not understand? And I go like, so again, I had to think fast. I said, Mr. Yamauchi, it may not be strong enough for Nintendo, but it's strong enough for my company. Let me publish it. And he said, what about my money, the 300K? What about my money? I said, I will pay you back $1 per unit until you get your money back. Deal. Okay, that's how I became a Nintendo publisher. From having been rebuffed with Square and Enix, who ended up being the biggest companies in the industry, we were told no, I was in. That's how I got my foot in the door. And then from then, whenever I had a meeting with Yamauchi about anything, and my connection with Nintendo was Yamauchi. It wasn't anybody else, it was Yamauchi. So whenever I had a thing that I needed to have done with Nintendo, I would make an appointment with him, and we would always do it on a day when I was his last appointment. And then we would play Go afterwards. So I became his Go playing friend. Nobody else in the industry played Go, only me. Go figure. I mean, Go, the problem with Go is that it's a serious game. And so people who play Go don't play computer games, and people who play computer games don't play Go. They're different worlds.
Yeah, but that turned out to be a strategic advantage for you.
Yes, absolutely. And so being a gaijin, being a foreigner in Japan, there are many disadvantages. I can't climb up the corporate ladder and become the president of Sony, no matter how good I am. But I can step outside and make my own business and do things that other Japanese people can't do. I mean, just look at Masayoshi Son. He was on the outside and he made SoftBank, and look where that is today. And it partially it is because they wouldn't let him inside the corporate structure. And so I had to work outside and do things differently. And so whenever, for every disadvantage, I had an advantage.
By this point, Bulletproof Software was a publisher of games, and Hank had moved to an executive role where he will attend computer game shows around the world and find games to publish in Japan. And now he could do that for Nintendo machines. In fact, Black Onyx got a Famicom version, which is one of my favorites out there, and it has a banger soundtrack, as well as a Game Boy Color version down the line, which has some extraordinary anime-inspired pixel art. But you can't play either of them because no one has done a fan translation of any type, at least yet. And it was during one of those trips on the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas that Hank discovered the other game that will change his life. Tetris. Because yes, as you probably realized the moment you looked at this book cover, this is the same Hank Rogers that co-founded the Tetris company and that went through an entire adventure and ordeal to secure the Tetris rights for Game Boy and Nintendo consoles, which Apple TV made a movie about him and about like a dramatization of all the events that happened there. No joke, when I originally started researching the Black Onyx, it took me way too long to make the connection that this was the very same Hank Rogers from Tetris. And while the movie does not mention the first game explicitly, if you know where to look, it does have a number of Easter eggs for those of you in the know. Now, the movie is an exaggeration. It's a movie, one of my favorite movies of all time, but a movie nonetheless. And if you want the actual detailed recounting of what happened, well, this book is where you want to go. And if you want to watch the full interview I did with Hank, it's on Nebula. I only show clips here, but we went into many other tangents in the full thing. And there's some bits about what happened after the events that inspired the movie that quite honestly, you could make a full video, a full sequel to the Tetris movie. I'm still deciding if I want to cover that at all. I guess we'll see.
And before we go, I'm going to leave you with a recommendation. Amy's Dead End Dream House is a show that we're doing currently in Nebula. It's a kid show for adults. It captures a very specific type of millennial angst that is interesting in that format. It's probably the most ambitious, interesting thing that we have done in Nebula so far, and I will just love to recommend it. If you haven't heard what Nebula is our baby. It's a streaming service that a bunch of creators created together that we all own a little bit of it. Is the most interesting things that happen in the creator economy in a really long time. We're making TV shows now. If you use my link, you get a discount. It's really cheap. It's like $3 a month with a discount. And by using the link, you're supporting me and supporting a ton of other creators. So please do. And thank you for supporting us as always.